This is day one of what I've begun to call the Tobacco Harm Reduction Roadshow. We've organised 3 events on e-cigarettes in Leicester, in Liverpool and finally in Glasgow. So we've got 3 events in 3 days. Good lineup of speakers at each event, and the idea is to open up for discussion many of the issues about the use of e-cigarettes, and in particular bans on vaping, where they happen, whether they're justified, what can be done about them. Been a lot of interest obviously in e-cigarettes and a lot of positive things about e-cigarettes, but and also the UK has one of the most benign approaches to e-cigarettes, and not, the use of e-cigarettes is not banned in public places, but we're seeing encroaching efforts by transport operators, by pubs and venues and stadia and so on to ban the use of e-cigarettes. Funnily enough, coming up here on the train today, one of our co-speakers, Konstantinos Farsalinas, was challenged by the train operator for vaping on the train and told that he might have to leave at the next station. So that just shows you the sort of rather ridiculous things that might be happening with vaping bans. So we're off to these 3 cities and hope we're going to have lively discussions about what is actually a very key issue for e-cigarette users, but also for people affected by vaping, but affected by e-cigarette use.
I couldn't see the point of using a nicotine-containing product to get off cigarettes until I started talking to people who actually used it. And I think that's a key message, that it's ignorance that's behind a lot of the moral panic around e-cigarettes and the prejudice against vaping.
So what the scientific community, know about vaping? First of all, there is no tobacco, no combustion, and no smoke coming from any cigarette. And this is something that the general public need to understand.
What is that we know? Where have we got consensus? Where we don't have consensus, why is that? And what are the reasons that we still have people who remain highly sceptical about vaping? And I think one of the best things that we need to be doing is having this sort of dialogue about it.
I went to an e-cigarette shop that just opened that day and bought an e-cigarette. I was an ex-smoker. 3 hours later, I have not smoked since.
You keep using the word e-cigarette, but I was wondering if you think that we should stop using that word, because it's not exactly reflective of what these devices actually are.
I think it's a key issue, and it's not only regarding e-cigarettes, but it's because we're moving into a new generation of nicotine products, of which e-cigarettes will only be one type of product. So we're used to the language of e-cigarettes and vapors and so on, but how do we describe people who use heat-not-burn products, the IQOS? How do we describe people who, if snus is ever illegal here, what do we call people who use snus? So there's probably a place for a more generic term, and I've been struggling with this. The one I like best is nicotinistas, people who like nicotine, or nicotinists.
I'd just like to know what you think. Obviously nicotine is a big issue regarding vaping and e-cigarettes and stopping smoking, but what about using the base and the technology to deliver other drugs, other medicines? One which I've been trying to watch and is a very confusing issue is cannabinoid, CBD juice, which is regularly sold and advertised on the high street, but may fall under a certain law which came in last year.
There is a current trend of cannabis to be, legalized everywhere for therapeutic purposes. I'm not sure that it's so well evidence-based, but it's going to be by far safer to vape cannabis instead of smoking it. There is no doubt in that. But there is also a big potential for other medications to be delivered by a function similar to e-cigarettes. We can maybe change the delivery mechanism, because in that case we don't need the visible vapor, which in e-cigarettes is attributed basically to PG and VG.
I think we've really had quite a treat here this afternoon with the questions and also the points that have been made by our panellists. So thank you all very much for this afternoon. Thank you.
WHO has the most ridiculous stance on this. It's in the absence of evidence for it, we are against it. That's not public health.
Because, of course, for many, especially in public health, there has been a constant disconnect on the basis of what tobacco companies are and what stop smoking services, and there the two will meet. And if you want to think about harm reduction, and that's what matters, then actually it may be that you'll have to meet.
We see a lot of information about the dangers of smoking, which we all agree there are some dangers. But we don't see as readily the information about e-cigarettes, do we?
It's happening exactly the opposite. We see information that doesn't even exist on the dangers of vaping.
Yeah.
Let me respond.
That's basically what I'm saying. Yeah. Those young people need to have that informed choice.
I suppose the key. Let me answer. I suppose. Do you think that a kid can have an informed choice at the age of 10?
Yes. Some kids can, yeah.
Okay. Then what is the information we should tell them? That vaping is lethal? We have absolutely no evidence that vaping has caused a single disease to anyone.
It's the tobacco companies I disagree with. That's where my passion lies. I've smoked, I've been in the trap of nicotine addiction, and I don't want to teach the next generation that they need nicotine. I don't want to be teaching my grandchildren that it's okay to stand there in a dummy because you need that. You need that drug. It's like me introducing my grandkids to coffee. They don't need coffee, and they do not need nicotine to be happy.
So it's always very nice to come to Merseyside and have such lively discussions, and there's different views in the audience, and it's always nice. You know, there's a model of the tobacco industry endgame. You know, we drive out smoking and we drive out the tobacco industry. Now that clearly hasn't happened, and you can't see how that would happen because no government's going to put up 60 billion to buy out BAT and close them down. You know, it's a huge company. So the end game for me with the tobacco industry, right, you know, still selling nasty stuff around the world, but they're getting into selling e-cigarettes here, still not the predominant players, but they're seeing their sales of cigarettes going down here, so there's a profit motive to get into the e-cigarette arena, and we know that, you know, big tobacco companies are now actually investing research money in designing safer products, and they're being quite honest, you know, in their studies showing the deleterious effects of smoking and the, you know, compared with e-cigarettes. So for me, there is a way forward in trying to beat the beast of the big tobacco, but it's putting enough pressure on them and enough encouragement on them to begin, you know, over maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years to become nicotine companies rather than cigarette companies.
I'd like to thank our speakers, Jerry, Judy and Konstantinos. Yes, please. Yep.
And the key question that we want to answer today is, how safe is vaping? How safe is vaping indeed? What is the science behind it? How is the benefits and the risks communicated to the general population? More importantly, if I look at Andy, how is it communicated one-to-one?
Here's a slide I have borrowed from Professor Nutt, and it gives quite a nice illustration of the different products that contain nicotine and the relative harms that they may have. And electronic cigarettes are in the little red square, so you can see that they have been placed closer to the nicotine replacement therapy products.
They say, oh, I don't like the smell. What smell? Can you smell anything in here? There's been people vaping in here before you come in. Lots of them.
What we need is evidence before we take leaps. And really the key thing for us was around this one here. Okay, this is what we felt very strongly about in red, was that this misperception of harm that was out there, and there's been other studies too that show that, and studies that show that it's rising, and we felt that it was our role really to challenge that.
Far too few people understand that, one, as Neil has pointed out earlier on in the year, smokers get pleasure from smoking. And every vaper that I've ever met gets pleasure from vaping.
I would hate us to go away today with the impression that smoking cessation advisors don't buy into this and don't see the relevance of it. We absolutely do, and we work with clients on a day-to-day basis who are using both NRT, e-cigs and Champix, and we would very much encourage people.
I'm in the hospital just a couple of weeks ago. There's a sign on the wall inside in the waiting room. The smoking of electronic cigarettes is prohibited. Not only is it prohibited, I felt saying that not only is it prohibited, it's impossible. Absolutely impossible. Yeah.
May I? We do suffer from homemade posters in our organisation. People do, we've got 48,000 staff, and you do get a lot of homemade posters, and it reflects what people perception. You mentioned about countries that don't embrace e-cigs.
Every country besides the UK.
Well, yeah,
maybe France too, as an exception.
That's right. I mean, there's a debate going on whether there's a great experiment going on in the UK, and I think we're kind of past that stage now.
In France.
So
France is following the UK, but
yeah.
I can't think of any other country besides those two.
There's been a very civil dialogue, and I think some brilliant suggestions and ideas that can be implemented in Glasgow. So thank you to you all.